Molweni, Dumelang, Lochani. Greetings. We're in the final stages and we are talking strategy execution. This is the key to success. To enabling sustainable success, you need to be executing on your strategy. In the next 20 or so slides, we'll be seeking to be able to help you go through the journey of strategy implementation. We began the process by introducing strategy and the context within which this strategy is to be developed. And then we spent a considerable amount of time developing the strategy. So we went through the strategy process. We understood from there that strategy is going to be influenced, among others, by what processes we put in place, the systems and structures that will buttress the progress we make. We now turn our attention to execution of the strategy, alternatively, its implementation. We will follow this with how we ensure sustainability of the enterprise by answering key questions relating to what stands in the way of you executing your strategy consistently and with great success. It is noteworthy that when purpose is clear, which Jeff Henderson made reference to in What You Are For, and there is commitment towards that purpose, supported by clear action, strategy execution becomes possible. What we're after are the results. There may be a lot in terms of input, but what truly matters is what results we produce. I want to introduce you to the concept of strategy, implementation, and review. With that, you need to be able to look into, well, what are the things that we have committed ourselves to doing and delivering? And of course, if you've got a way of keeping score, you will have a scoreboard. Based on what has been done to date, can we say we are succeeding or we're lagging behind? Then we take time to plan looking into the future. Now, I will introduce the terminology of widely important goals, which is WIGs, and what are the key measures. The proposition I want to give through to you is one that says, take action, consistent action on a daily and then weekly basis. When you do that, you will create a rhythm of performance and accountability. So, a minor exercise I want to bring through to you. I have an acrostic I've put together called Dr. Greg. Essentially, it addresses itself to 5 key elements. DR stands for desired results. G stands for the guidelines and the standards that need to be followed. Now, R stands for resources that are necessary to deliver on what's required. And then A is for accountability, while C has everything to do with the consequences of the delivery. In the next 2-3 slides, we're going to then be taking ourselves through the process of reviewing what we've done up until now and take ourselves into the future better. Starting off with DR, desired results. You look into your current situation and you say, what were the things that we desired to have done? What are the actions that are required to deliver that which we desire? And what are the actual actions we have carried out? When you list those, it just gives you a chance to hold up the mirror and say, we're doing the right things or not. The next point I would like you to spend some time on is identify what are the guidelines, what are the standards that have been provided in industry or from your service level agreement with your customer. What are the resources you will need to get the job done? And then, how will you ensure accountability? Who should account for what? and then set up the dates by which these deliveries will need to have been made. As you work through this, it may look administrative and taking some time. However, just by holding up the mirror, you may find it's the right review right now. Finally, everybody wants to have something that motivates them to do the work that needs to be done. When you've thought through what the consequence is when the job is done successfully, that looks into what are the rewards that will be coming through to the people who do the work. Then, what are the sanctions necessary if it is to be that we are not meeting the goals that have been set for ourselves? Think through that. It will take you places. When you've got them lined side by side, it will be easier for people to say, I will pursue this because this matches my requirements. I need to be buying such and such. The rewards associated with doing this work will measure up to what I need. An approach that you will have picked up in the video clip that I've made reference to, coming through from Chris McChesney, who wrote together with Sean Covey and Jim Halling the 4 disciplines of execution. The approach here is one that says we want to be very disciplined in focusing on what's wildly important and acting on the lead measures, and then keeping a compelling scoreboard that keeps us on track while working towards ensuring that we have a rhythm of accountability and all the people we're with become excited about doing the work on a daily and monthly basis. The 4 disciplines process takes us to a realization that there are things we can do that will create breakthroughs. There are things that we can do just by a signing off, a stroke of a pen, and this thing is done. And then there are things that are really the life support of your business. These should be kept in place, in check all the time. And finally, it's important to be able to think about how you can truly make breakthroughs so that you can execute on what is most critical for your business and takes your business to the future better. We will move from theory into practice. As an entrepreneur, you want to shift your ideas and turn them into things. Thoughts become things when we work on them. Let's have an example of how we could be able to put in place goals that are measurable and therefore can be executable. The example that is in front of you is one of a wildly important goal, which is about improving inventory processes for the organization. The inventory processing would require us to consider what's our current situation, what are desired results, and by when do we want to see the shift taking place. You call that a deadline. Then you ask some key questions. Is it possible that what we are doing will have negative, unintended consequences? If not, well, we're in a good place. Is it possible also that what we have is going to be difficult to manipulate so no one comes up with a non-performance and then explain themselves away? Thirdly, it's important to articulate that the goal we are setting is achievable. Because if it is not achievable, it becomes disheartening and discouraging. Finally, it's important to look into whether what we are doing has good data so we are not thumb-sucking. The example that is in front of you also looks into 3 specific areas wherein improvement was sought. The accuracy rate needed to be improving from a mere 95% to 98%. That 3% differential was absolutely vital. But when should this be happening? Well, the idea is to make sure that it happens by the end of July. The second measurement is on inventory turns. Instead of turning inventory 8 times a year, we're seeking to be able to turn inventory 10 times a year. And that should also be happening by July 31st. Finally, the return on investment. A desire to increase the return on investment from 12% a year to 30% a year. That's almost trebling itself. Now, that number is a significant number. Now, what you then go into is ranking. Which of these really has what your gut tells you needs to be done? Turns out to be the inventory turns were the most important and most critical because it's about improving inventory processing. The second important area was accuracy. The third was return on investment. Now, the goal is redefined as improving inventory processing by increasing inventory turns from 8 to 10 per year by the end of July. Now that is a clear, smart goal. It is specific, it is measurable, it is achievable. And also, as it turns out to be, it is not just realistic, it is relevant. And it is time-bound, so therefore, it is a smart goal. Now it's your turn to be able to do exactly what was done in the previous example. Work on it. And when your gut feel tells you to do something differently, by all means, follow your gut. What you will need to pay attention to is to limit the amount of time you spend drafting the wildly important goals. You will need to be very frank, hold robust, open and candid conversations about the goals. Because some goals may be things you put in place just to tell yourself there is something being done, and in fact doesn't work out that way. It's important to avoid cascading wildly important goals that are really clones of what already exists. It is also going to be vital that you close significant performance gaps. You know what's desired and you know what's currently in place. Finally, you want to be able to set goals that are within your circle of influence so that you are not disheartened in your journey. Here is another way of looking at a wildly important goal, one that is not only smart, but allocates responsibilities for actual execution. So here you have a wildly important goal with clear leg measures. Now consider this. What this organization is looking at is growing its revenues from 16 million to 20 million in a financial year. Then it says, who shall deliver that? The sales team commits to creating $2 million worth of new revenue in the financial year. So that's half of what is being looked for. And then major accounts say we will also raise our hand and we will ensure we grow major accounts revenue from 16 million to 18 million in this financial year. So from those two departments, you have the 4 million growth from 16 to 20. But what is also important is that the IT department commits itself and says we will maintain a stable platform with no downtime. Now, obviously, that beats even anything that comes from ESCOM. You will be excited about that. Well, I trust that you can do the same on your side as you look back to the earlier process of developing your wildly important goal with a movement from to by a set date. Go back to Chris McChesney's presentation on the 4 disciplines in a nutshell. There is a beginning point, there is an end point, and there is a deadline. Keep that in focus. The second discipline of implementing a strategy is one that says we've got to act on the lead measures. It draws its insights from Pareto principle that says 80% of the results come from 20% of activities. Can you think through how you can be applying the same in your own environment? Sometimes it is necessary to be able to define things. So let's look into the difference between lag measures and lead measures. Lag measures are specifically looking into proof that the goal has been achieved, while the lead measure is what you gotta be able to do that leads you towards the goal. So it's a predictor of the achievability of the goal. It is also something that you can influence. So if we look into just 3 simple examples, if you were to lose weight, a lag measure is a number of kilograms that have been lost. On the other side, the lead measures have to do with the number of calories that are in your diet and the amount of exercising that you do measured in kilometers. If you're looking at reducing accidents, you could be looking at a lag measure that has got the monthly incident report, whereas a lead measure will be to say, are we in compliance with 4 key safety standards? This is what NOSA would be putting together for you. And finally, if you're looking at increasing store sales, here is an example of a lag measure. You are going to look at your monthly sales report. On the other hand, the lead measure will be one where you are looking at what are the out of stock items and how many are they, because when we run out of that, it means a customer walks into our space and they cannot have that particular item. That obviously creates dissatisfaction to our customer. Can we minimize the number of out of stock items? So now let's look at an example of a lead measure builder. You have a wildly important goal, which is to meet last year's revenue numbers through increasing the units per transaction from 1.7 to 2.1. What are we looking at here? Well, 4 specific areas. First, it's looking into instant credit being offered through to customers. So what are we going to measure? The number of invitations extended per associate, per employee who is engaging with the customers. Second, suggestive selling is a real activity we can embark on. What becomes the measure? It's showing at least 4 pairs of shoes to every client that walks into our shop. Third, an activity we can embark on is ensuring that every customer receives a thank you note. Then, what do we measure? We measure that 100% of all the clients have received a handwritten thank you note within 48 hours of being on our premises. Fourth, we want to be able to have an activity which is about sending pre-sale email blitzes. Well, how do we measure that? We measure that by sending 2 emails to every one of the customers that we've had before, coming through before the sale. So it could very well be that it is 5 days before the sale and 2 days before the sale. When that happens, we get to be able to have this further measurement that we've had previously. And what is that measurement looking into? It's looking into whether the measure is predictive, it is influenceable, and we can get the data related to it. When we've got that working, hey, we can start ranking and determine what will work. So now we have at least 3 key lead measures we can work with. The first one that we find of greater value is to show 4 pairs of shoes to 100% of clients. The second lead measure is to offer instant credit to all of our customers who are not instant credit holders as yet. And the third and final one is to send 2 emails to all of our customers before the sale begins. In that way, we maintain interest with them and they feel treasured. So, why don't you go ahead and do your own process similar to the one we had in the shoe shop. you will notice that I have given you some ways of processing this. You just instead insert your most important activities or additional candidates into the space called wildly important goal. You ask the question, how could we measure this? Then you create the candidate lead measures for each of the activities. Then you run each one of the candidate lead measures through the checklist that goes with, is it proactive? Is it predictable? Is it influenceable? And that is the critical thing that you're wanting to be able to put in place. And finally, you want to rank them. And notice that we have reference to proactivity. Actually, what you're wanting to insert in there is it predictive? When you've got that, we're going places. It is also important to take some notes around what you do with the creation of lead measures. It is easy to be tempted to convert legs into lead measures. Shy away from that. It is also possible that you can choose unleverageable activities and end up not having lead measures to work with. That too is something that requires attention. It's possible for you to pick very poor lead measures where there is insufficient data, where it is not easy to be able to get the manipulation around, but they're easier to measure. And you could easily be able to end up with lead measures that are not holding you or the people that are working with you accountable. And finally, it's easy to skip the lead measures altogether and focus your attention on leg measures because you've always been doing that anyway. The proposition is one that says, be disciplined towards ensuring that you've got lead measures that guide you towards the realization of the goals you've set for yourself. I wish you great success in what you do. So, as we bring this conversation to a close, we look into a flow chart that is going to help you to appreciate how your strategy execution can follow a process that has wildly important goals with leg measures, and then those leg measures also have lead measures that determine the execution capability of the goals. First, start off by looking into the example we've got. We're looking at growing revenues by 4 million, from 16 million to 20 million in this financial year. We identified earlier that we've got the sales team raising their hand and say they will create 2 million new revenue for the financial year, while major accounts said, yeah, we will also bring our own 2 million. The ICT department, the information technology team, comes to it and says, we will contribute by enhancing in order to enhance our customer loyalty by ensuring we maintain a stable platform with zero downtime. So let's look at what it is that the sales team say they're going to do. Well, as lead measures, they say they will sign contracts with 3 qualified partner sellers this quarter. They will also grow outbound calls to qualified leads from 200 to 250 per week. And as you think through that, well, they come up with something even bigger. They say they will increase their follow-up referral calls from 6 to 8 per week. And that is how they're going to ensure they get their 2 million. The major accounts come through and they say, what we will do is to consistently make 5 face-to-face visits per week. We will ensure that all of the major account partners are visited on a weekly basis. And we will ensure that 75% of all of our calls meet with consultative call standard checklist. Therefore, there will be a sense amongst our customers that we are definitely thinking about them in what we are doing. On the other side, the ICT team say we will ensure 100% adherence to maintenance schedule through a daily checklist. because we want to keep uptime. We want no downtime. Then they say they will establish a baseline of 80% of disk space at all times. And finally, they will ensure that they've got 100% of the crew at all shifts. That way, there isn't going to be an excuse for why things could not be realized. Now, taking yourself back to the beginning of this process, we had Chris McChesney helping you to identify what you can do following the 4 disciplines of execution. And this time, we've only paid attention to the first 2. When we get together next Monday, we will be paying attention to what happens with the last 2 because they are critical in addressing the barriers to the implementation of strategies. I wish you great success throughout this week while you work on your wildly important goals with leg measures and then work on your lead measures, building on the activities you set aside for each and every one of the goals you've set. Wishing you great success and look forward to engaging with you next week. God bless you.